So welcome, everyone. My name is Julie Trzynski. I am the Associate Director in the Center for Career Development. And tonight we've got our psychology major alumni panel. So I have three fantastic alumni joining me tonight to talk a little bit about their experience and kind of share how they've leveraged their psychology major in the different things that they do. See, as I have them each introduce themselves and talk a little bit about kind of what they're doing currently. They're all doing some very different things, which is kind of exciting. So the whole idea behind this event is to really also show students just the breadth of opportunities available as a psychology major and the many different ways you can kind of use, your liberal arts education and your psychology major during your time at Holy Cross to kind of take that in any number of different directions post-grad. Just to kind of talk through the logistics for the evening, I will kind of moderate the discussion for the next 40 minutes or so. But I really want to make sure that, questions from students can get answered. So I certainly have questions that I have ready, but as I'm talking, if there's questions that, become top of mind, feel free to post a question in the chat and I'll either kind of infuse that as we're talking. I'll also make sure we've got time at the end for the last 15, 20 minutes, just to kind of open it up for questions from anyone that's here. But feel free to use the chat as we're talking as well. All right, so why don't we get started? So what I'd like each alum to do first, we have Neha, Tavares, and Elizabeth here to join us, and I'll ask each of them to just kind of introduce themselves, maybe share, obviously you're all psych majors, but share your class year and a little bit about what you are doing currently. So Neha, did you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Neha Wax. I graduated from Holy Cross in 2010, and then I went to Tufts School of Medicine in Boston afterwards. And then I did my family medicine residency here in Worcester at UMass. And I'm currently a hospitalist at UMass. So I've been pretty much working through the entire pandemic and the surge, seeing COVID patients and taking care of all of the other patients that get admitted to the hospital as well. I am also the associate program director for the family medicine residency at UMass. And then I'm also the fourth year medical student acting internship rotation director. So I play two different roles, I guess, at UMass. I work as a doctor, but I also do a lot of educational activities with the residents and medical students, which I think has been fantastic because it helps me balance my science brain with my teaching brain. So I'm happy to answer any questions whenever we open it up regarding this pathway. But I'm looking forward to chatting with you all tonight.
Perfect, thank you. Tavares, did you want to go next?
Sure. Tavares Brewington, class of 2000, obviously a psych major. After Holy Cross, I went to Boston College Law School, got my law degree, practiced law for a while in an international law firm, went to Cornell and got my MBA. Now I worked at the Department of Justice for a while, and now I'm the general counsel of a multinational transportation company. And essentially what that role is, I run the legal department. And so I deal with all the legal issues from mergers and acquisitions to lawsuits to contract negotiations, and happy to talk to you more about it.
Perfect, thank you.
Awesome.
Elizabeth.
All right, and I'm Elizabeth Erickson. I graduated in 2015, so I wasn't, I was in your shoes not too long ago. I work at Fidelity Investments as an HR operations lead. I've been at Fidelity since I graduated from Holy Cross. I first took a kind of contract job at the firm just to get my foot in the door and to kind of get my feet wet into the business side of things because I hadn't had much experience with it. And I first worked for that in like a sales type of administrative project coordinator role for the first year. And then for the last, I guess, almost coming up on 5 years, I've been working in HR. I worked in training and development for our equity investment professionals. And then I just started a new job last fall in HR operations, where my team handles everything from the moment a temporary candidate gets a verbal offer to then their start. And so working with their manager and the candidate on the process of their onboarding. And while I'm not working, I'm right now earning a part-time MBA at BU. Concentrating in leadership and organizational transformation. So I'm excited for the panel tonight to talk a little bit more about our psych majors and our jobs right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So if I would love to hear if each of you could talk a little bit about kind of what was some of the deciding factors in terms of why you chose Holy Cross, and then kind of why psychology, like what led you to that major. Any one of you can jump in.
I'll go ahead. My parents were both in psychology. So growing up, that was really the biggest career I was exposed to. And when I took the intro psych class, it was really my kind of where I was the most interested. So I kind of just decided to go with that for a major. And just backing up to why I chose Holy Cross, I really liked the environment, the small liberal arts college, and ultimately, while I was a psych major, I wasn't quite sure what I would do eventually with it, but I just knew that those were the classes that I enjoyed the most, and that was what I wanted to be spending my time doing while I was at Holy Cross.
So I think I chose Holy Cross because one, when I went for a college visit, I loved the campus. And then I really met a lot of the professors. I played football at Holy Cross. And so, I just really liked the coaching staff and just the academic rigor of the school. And everyone talked about the alumni base, which I can tell you is really, really strong. And that's why I chose the school. I chose psychology because I took an intro to psych class just on a whim, and I really enjoyed it. And I met Dr. Axelson and built a relationship with him in that class, and he was sort of a mentor to me throughout college, and so it was a pretty good fit.
So for me, I think picking Holy Cross was similar to what the other two have said. I liked the small liberal arts environment. I liked the rigor of the education. I grew up in Shrewsbury, Mass, so really close by, and so I had heard about how awesome Holy Cross was growing up as well. All through high school and through just people my parents knew as well. And it's a beautiful campus, of course. And in terms of why I chose psychology, I've always been interested in psychology and sort of the mind-body connection. And I actually came to Holy Cross knowing that I wanted to go to medical school after. And so I was drawn to the biopsychology piece of the psychology major, especially cognitive neuroscience. I worked in Professor DiGirolmo's lab, I think, for 3 years. Professor Bertrand's classes and all of the health psychology classes, those were really, really cool to me. And I really enjoyed taking those. And I think one of the key pieces of the psychology major that I really appreciated was the research aspect of it as well. I know a lot of people who do research go in and then become scientists later, but also it's really important to understand research when you're going into medicine because it helps you understand sometimes what you're doing in medicine. And so I liked being on the other side of it as well.
Awesome. And why have you, Nihal? Let's talk a little bit about, and you kind of spoke to it a bit, but like I'm curious about kind of how you spent your time, outside of the classroom too. You talked about doing research, but what were some other ways that you kind of got involved, or what were you involved in outside of academics during your time at Holy Cross?
Yeah. So research was definitely a big piece of what I did outside of classes. I think I started in Professor Kramer's lab first or second year at Holy Cross, and then sort of went into Professor DiGirolmo's lab afterwards. I also spent time volunteering at UMass when I was at Holy Cross. I also spent time at All Saints Church volunteering there. I don't know what it's called anymore, and I don't know if it still exists, but I started the extracurricular club at Holy Cross, where you go to Shari's house and host birthday parties for kids who have cancer and other oncologic disorders. So I was really involved in a lot of service activities, and then obviously the medicine/science piece of it.
Thank you. And Tavares and Elizabeth, what about you?
I mean, I can go. I mean, in addition to football, and that took up a large part of my time, but I also worked at the YMCA in Worcester, the Central Branch, with their Spartacus program at risk teens. And I did that from sophomore year all the way until I graduated. And it was, that's really what got me interested in the legal field, you know, dealing with a lot of those kids and what they were experiencing. And so I did that in a lot of my time.
Great.
And I did a few things. So I worked as a tour guide my senior year at admissions. I served on the psychology student advisory committee board for most of my time. I think like sophomore through senior year. I really liked that, and I felt like I developed a lot of good relationships with professors and other psych students through that too. And I also was involved with what's it called? SPUD through the nativity school. And so, yeah, kept myself busy. And I think, I don't know if I just mentioned this, but senior year, I did research in Professor Ludden's lab on adolescence and caffeine use. So I really like that.
Fabulous. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about like shifting gears from, you know, during your time at Holy Cross and then even post-grad, what kind of planned or even unplanned events really connected you to your industry in that first job after Holy Cross? And then kind of along those lines, how did you determine it was really the right fit for you? I'd love to hear about kind of that career path and what led you to where you are initially. You want to start, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't that long ago, but when I was at Holy Cross, I really wasn't sure what I would end up doing. I knew that I really liked working with people and wasn't sure if I would go more of like the clinical or therapy route. But I ultimately kind of spent a lot of time trying to figure that out senior year, networking with different people that were family friends or connections that I had to people, and tried to like really learn about different industries and different jobs. One example even was that I remember I met with a woman who worked in admissions at Holy Cross, because I was thinking like I would love to talk to people all day. Maybe I'd like a job with that. So I wasn't quite sure what I would do, but something I did really like about the psych major, and I can talk about this after too, is just that it had the qualitative and quantitative aspects. And I think that, through my psych major, I sat through research methods classes and statistics, and then also sat in social psych classes and classes that were like around development and different things like that. And so basically senior year, I ended up talking with someone at Fidelity, and then got a job there. And it wasn't until about a year into my work at Fidelity that I gravitated towards HR. And now that's kind of like when I figured out that I wanted to stay with it. But it took a lot of trying out trying to figure out what exactly I would do. And so it definitely, like right out of college, I definitely still didn't really know what I would kind of ultimately be doing. And I still don't totally know, but I know I like HR, and I know that I've enjoyed it so far. So.
Perfect. I love that. You don't have to have it all figured out, right? So that's good. Tavares or Neha, what do you think? Either one.
So for me, in terms of planned activities, I think the things that were very intentional when I was at Holy Cross obviously was the research piece of it. And Holy Cross, when I was there, had a program where if you were in the pre-med program at Holy Cross, you could apply early to Tufts. And so that was a very intentional planned, thing I had done early on. I think it was my sophomore year or junior year. So I had actually gotten accepted to Tufts early prior to senior year. So that was very intentional and planned because I had to make sure I had taken the right classes to apply and I had, beefed up my resume in the right ways to apply early to medical school. Things that were unplanned and unintentional. I forgot to mention earlier, I was also one of the mentors in the Odyssey program, and I was also one of the PAL leaders. And I did that for 2 or 3 years while I was at Holy Cross. And I just did it because I loved it. I enjoyed the mentoring. I loved teaching, even though, Orgo is not known to be the most well-loved class amongst pre-med students, I actually really enjoyed teaching it because it was just really exciting to come up with ways that were innovative and creative to teach the concepts, understand them, and then see my peers actually enjoy it. And that was something that I didn't realize I loved so much until I got to UMass and the position for taking on a more teaching role opened up. And now I'm involved in a lot of curricular development for the medical school and for the residency. A lot of mentorship, a lot of academic medicine pieces that I don't think I necessarily knew how much I appreciated and loved at Holy Cross that I do more of now.
Yeah. So, I mean, the unplanned, again, I said I was working at the Central Branch YMCA, and I was working with kids there, and I really, this is around sophomore year, thought, I may be interested in law. And I remember in the office hours, I said that to Dr. Axelson, and his wife was a lawyer at the time. And he was like, why don't you spend the day with my wife? And so she came and picked me up, and I just knew at that point I really wanted to practice law. But the idea of law morphed over time. When I actually got into law school, you see that law is so broad and there's so many things that you can do. And so I ultimately went into a law firm in the life sciences department, in the litigation department. And so going to court, arguing cases. And that's when my, psychology major really kicked in, because I think someone said the quantitative and qualitative instruction. Because when you're a lawyer and you're a litigator, your job is to take something very complex and make it simple for the jury. And so you have to have both. You have to understand the science. We represented companies like Pfizer, Merck on product liability claims when their medicines or their therapies would arguably hurt someone. You have to explain that in front of a jury and a judge. And I really found my instruction at Holy Cross in the psych department really helped me with that. I frankly don't know if I would have been able to do it if I didn't do the research labs and understand statistics and get into the science. So that was interesting. And then after the law firm, I went into the Department of Justice, which was a different world. And I was in the organized crime group. Whitey Bulger, that case was in my group. And so just really, transitioning into that space, just having the dexterity to change and really learn a different area of law. And I think that my education at Holy Cross really helped me to do that as well. And now I'm in a multinational company. And so, my job now is I travel a lot dealing with regulatory issues, with the EU, the US, in Asia. And so you really have to be able to adapt to those environments and to different spaces. But it's been really fun. So all of that was unplanned, right? I thought I was going to start out, in like a public, service, a public interest law firm, and now I'm in a major corporation.
That's great. So kind of building upon that, Tavares, I'm curious about how, for each of you, as you've kind of reflected upon how that career path has kind of, shifted and grown. How did the psych major at all influence any of your career decisions? Like, do you find that kind of either, things you were instilled in you as a psych major, that was kind of factors as you've been kind of navigating your careers?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I know I don't want to sound like cliche or corny. It was really the work that you had to put in as a psych major. It gave me the real confidence to do a lot of the things I needed to do. And also being an athlete, right? Because I remember days, I would sleep in the lab because I would have to go to practice and still get my research done for the symposium and doing that. And then when I got out into the professional world, that just ability, and I think that's Holy Cross generally, to handle so much and to do it at a high level, I think that really gave me an advantage in my career.
I have to really echo that sentiment. I think Holy Cross really, really does an amazing job of instilling in you a great work ethic that'll carry you through a lot. I remember starting first year of medical school, and in the same way, I had classmates who were really stressed and worried based off of the amount of workload. And I thought for sure medical school compared to Holy Cross was a lot easier. So Holy Cross really does, again, like Tavares was saying, not to sound cliche, but it really does get you ready for whatever is next in your life. And then the same thing with residency. You know, I felt like I could handle the work hours, but I think the other thing Holy Cross taught me was to have balance and have perspective on what I'm doing. So even, you know, in the midst of the pandemic, when things weren't great in the hospital, I think having that perspective on the future, or having that perspective on what it means to balance all the things we appreciate in life, was something that Holy Cross instills, and it stays with you. I really think that a lot of the classes I took in Holy Cross actually informed some of the way I practice medicine now. So health psychology, you know, helps me to think about the patient as a whole person, right? It makes me think about the mental aspects of their care, helps me not just see a patient as a disease entity. And these are things that they talk about in medical school, but I think having taken that class at Holy Cross gave me a different perspective. And then other things like, for example, the biopsychosocial model that as a psychology major, I'm sure you hear about in every single class. Again, they talk about that in medical school, they talk about it in residency, but I had a really, I think, deeper understanding of what that really meant. And I think that really informed my ability to take care of, I did residency in an underserved urban clinic, and it helped me to really take care of my patients as whole people, take care of communities, and think about the social determinants of health that are really important. And I think I got that learning and those values from Holy Cross.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that come to mind about kind of the psych major and Holy Cross influencing my career. I think, you know, while I was in the major, I really liked the people aspect, what motivates people, how people function. And I have later kind of found, like, while I'm in the MBA right now, last year or the year before, I took a class called organizational behavior, which kind of brought me right back to my psych days. Like, the class was all about how leaders function, what motivates people, why people stay at companies, what they need out of their managers, how to acquire and manage talent. And so I think that, you know, having that spark kind of go off again, like, oh, this was from my psych major, these are things that are really important in an organization that sometimes get overlooked when, you know, people just think about maybe like finance or marketing or sales as the core of the organization. There's also so much of like the industrial organization piece, or the organizational behavior that functions within businesses. And then I think one of the other things that I just wanted to mention was that definitely the workload, I feel like, prepared me for you know, working full time. And I think that one of the things that you know, Tavares, you were talking about Professor Axelson, I took a few classes with him, and I always think about this one experience I had in the physiological psychology class that I took. I remember kind of I had this narrative in my head in high school and at Holy Cross, like that, you know, I wasn't good at science, wasn't good at math, like the social sciences subjects were just better off for me. And I started taking the physio psych class, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is really tough. This is like heavier science than like what I've kind of done before. And I remember kind of doing poorly on the first test, and then meeting with Professor Axelson and him being like, you can do this, you just have to put the work in. And I feel like that's actually really that kind of experience of like struggling and then doing much better the rest of the course has kind of like paved a pathway for me to give myself the confidence that like I can do something if I put my mind to it. And even if it's something tricky, like pretty quantitative or something math heavy, that I can do it. So
Yeah. And I would also say that I found the psych department, you know, apart from the academic piece, to be the professors really cared, right? And I think that that's indicative of what the experience is at Holy Cross. You know, I remember taking statistics with Professor Kramer, and I just couldn't get it. And I remember going to office hours every day, and she was there, and I ultimately got it, and I use it constantly, you know. And you know, and I'll share a personal story. You know, my first year of law school, my mother died suddenly, and when I went to the funeral, I look in the back of the room and I see professors from Holy Cross there. you know? And so that's the kind of place it is, right? And I think, Dr. Axelson and some other professors from the department were there. I think that's what you're getting in the psych department. And I'm sure it's elsewhere too, but that was my experience.
Yeah, and then kind of building upon that, so let's talk a little bit about kind of mentors, right? And mentorship. I think you all talked about kind of the mentorship you experienced like during your time at Holy Cross, particularly through some of the faculty in the psych department. But I'd be curious to hear too about like what other mentors have kind of come into play for you as you've moved beyond Holy Cross and in your career, and like how do you kind of find those people? How do you cultivate those relationships? Because I think that's such a critical part of like that whole career journey. You wanna start?
Since I'm the old guy on the call, I'll tell you this in all honesty. The Holy Cross Alumni Network is unbelievable, but you have to put in the work to access it. And I'll give you a couple of examples. When I was at Holy Cross and I was getting ready to go to BC, there was a Supreme Court judge, Mr. O'Connor, who lived in Shrewsbury, and every Sunday he would pick me up, and he understood I wanted to go to law school, and he would sit with me for an hour, him and his wife talking about the law and what it meant. And that's what you get at Holy Cross. Guy didn't know me from anything, but after that, he showed up every day. And then I remember going to the Department of Justice, and my first day, and I have FBI agents, CIA agents, all Holy Cross grads showing up at my door and saying, "Hey, do you need help? We're here for you." And then at my company, the CEO is a Holy Cross grad. And you can imagine a multinational company and you're this new guy and the CEO is reaching out to you. And so that's what the school is about in terms of mentorship, right? But you have to kind of put yourself out there to access it. But it's unbelievable, and people's willingness to give back.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I wanted to say was that Fidelity is it's a big workplace for Holy Cross alum. Like I know when you look on LinkedIn, Fidelity definitely has a lot of Holy Cross alum, I think because it's based in Boston. And so honestly, my first year at Fidelity, I went out of my way to look on LinkedIn to find whoever I could that had gone to Holy Cross and ask them to get coffee, because that first year of work, I didn't totally know what I was going to do next. And I knew I was in a contract job. So I started to talk to all different people, someone who did marketing, someone who did communications, and they were also willing to talk to me. So it was not only those kinds of conversations, but then over time, I've definitely developed relationships with people who've kind of become my mentors, a lot of women actually at work. And I think one thing that I will say as well, so they've helped me tremendously. And I think, I'm always impressed by how much people are willing to go out of their way to help younger people in their careers. But one of the things that I will mention is that I do feel like your classmates are a huge asset. I have two good friends of mine who work in HR. One's at a law firm and one is at a tent company. And we talk all the time about like how we manage certain things and any advice we can share or ask for help. And so even though my classmates were my age and there were two of my really good friends at school, like we really leaned on each other for that. And I think that might not necessarily be what you think of when you think of a mentor, but that kind of relationship with someone who's even your age can be just as valuable.
I think that's a really good point. And I hadn't thought about it until you said it, Elizabeth. But that's really true for me as well, that a lot of my Holy Cross friends and I, um, a lot of them have gone into medicine and we text each other questions all the time. Like, oh, I just saw a patient with so-and-so. What do you think? And so that's a really good form of mentorship that's peer-to-peer. And it's really nice to even bounce ideas off of each other when we're trying to come up with more innovative ways to do what we're doing. For me, mentors outside of my peers and outside of Holy Cross alumni were sort of set in place just by the structure of medicine. in medical school, they pair you up with a mentor, and in residency, they pair you up with a mentor. But I think that one thing Holy Cross taught me was to just put yourself out there. And I remember sitting actually at a panel similar to this, where they were talking about getting uncomfortable. And so I always took that with me. And so even though I had mentors that were assigned to me, I think what was really important was to actually find mentors who were going to challenge me, or find mentors who were doing things that I might see myself doing in the future. And I think the biggest advice I can give in that is just put yourself out there, get uncomfortable, send that email, walk by that person's office, start a conversation, and find mentors who are people you look up to, and people who can model some of the career paths that you might be considering.
I definitely agree. And I want to throw in one more thing that I recently learned that I think is really awesome. I had gone to a webinar or something like that at work, and they said you need 3 people. You need a manager, a mentor, and a cheerleader. So like someone who's going to be there for you, cheering you on, wanting you to succeed, a mentor who's like teaching you the ways, helping you figure out stuff, and a manager who's just the person you work with every day. And you might not always find those 3 people in one person. You kind of need 3 different people. And I think throughout your career, you'll have good relationships with many different people, and you can see people in different lights, but you don't always have to think of like your manager as the person who's your mentor. Like you can kind of think about it like that.
I love that. That's a great way to think about it. So to kind of shift gears a little bit, let's talk a little bit about kind of each of your work environments. And I'm curious about kind of diversity. What does diversity look like for you? Is the environment that you're working in pretty diverse? And like, and how did Holy Cross like help to prepare you to work in diverse teams? Anyone can jump in.
Yeah, that's a good one, because when I went to Holy Cross in 1996, was my freshman year. I mean, the school really wasn't that diverse. We had some diversity, but I think the school now is much more diverse. And I was also a first generation college student, so you can imagine I'm showing up to Holy Cross, and I'm figuring it out. But again, I think the environment was one where people cared, and then you started to build the skill set to take risks, right? And really make connections with people that you never thought you would. And that skill has been invaluable in my career, right? And so in my environment now, it's more diverse, but as an African American man in the law and in executive leadership, there's still not as much representation as I would like to see. But, I think my experience at Holy Cross allows me to, one, advocate for more diversity, and to build relationships with people from all different backgrounds, and to build that inclusive environment. And I think that that's important.
I can go next. I think
Go ahead.
oh yeah,
Go ahead,
I
Elizabeth.
think one of the things that I mean, I think that that diversity is becoming an even bigger topic of conversation now than it even was 5 years ago. Like I know it was 5 years ago, wasn't that long ago, but I think it's awesome that it's being brought to the forefront. I think that one of the things that is kind of cool in my job is that I do get to have a little bit more of an input in just diversity at the firm and increasing it. Throughout my time, I've seen there's been a lot of programs that I've helped work on that have brought in like more diversity internship opportunities, and different kind of diversity initiatives with hiring and talent acquisition. I definitely think that my company and my group is getting to a better place when it comes to diversity, whether it be diversity of thought or in any sort of way. But I think one of the things that, speaking of mentorships, one of the things that I really like that I've tried to implement is that your mentor, or a lot of times work will pair you up with someone who may have a similar background to you, may look like you, may, you know, maybe like you in some sort of way. And I actually think that one of the things that I've learned in my MBA is that it can actually really be beneficial for workplaces to not necessarily do that, just to create more diversity, have people who have different people paired with different people than I think companies would normally do. So I will say that's something that I think I've kind of learned about and have been trying to implement.
So I think Holy Cross taught me to listen and appreciate stories. So I worked a lot with Dean Levine and Odyssey. And I think one of the things I learned during that is everybody has a story. You know, it may not be the same as yours. It may have some similarities to yours. And I think that piece of it really carried into medicine for me. And working in an urban underserved clinic, that was something that really informed care. Hearing what my patients had to say, figuring out, again, what they needed, not just right now to lower their blood pressure or what they needed right now just to lower their cholesterol, but what they needed to be well overall, what their kids needed, what their elderly parents needed, you know, what things determined their job, what things determined their ability to use Zoom for, you know, schooling. And I think those pieces are really brought to light in medicine just from listening and from hearing stories. And the other piece of it in my education role is that at UMass, there is a lot of diversity amongst the physicians and the residents, and it's something that we're continuously working on every day. We do have a committee that in our residency looks at how we appreciate and increase diversity. We also have something called a holistic review where we're trying to actually look at our applicants holistically. So we're looking not just at their test scores, but we're looking at what else they did. What is their story? And so we're working really hard to make sure that our you know, our doctors and our residents reflect our community and reflect the diversity that exists in Massachusetts and in Worcester.
That's great. Thank you. That was just good to hear from all three of you and sharing kind of very different perspectives. So that's fabulous. I do want to do a quick check-in. So I have certainly more questions I could ask, but I would love to make sure we get it from, you know, the students on the call. So I will throw out there, students, if there's questions you have, please don't be shy. You can either pop the question in the chat and I'm happy to ask it on your behalf, or it's not that big of a group. I'm also very comfortable. If anyone has questions, feel free, you can unmute yourself and just ask away. So I'll pause and see if anyone has questions before I continue with mine. Yes, Aioli, go ahead.
Thanks, all of you for like sharing your experiences. This question is directed towards Elizabeth, just because I'm considering a career for industrial organizational psychology. And recently in one of the talks I had with an alumni, they did mention about fidelity and how it's a good starting path for me because HR is very similar. And I know how you mentioned you've been taking leadership courses and your background. And so I was just interested, what made you more interested in HR? Like, how did you decide that this was the right path for you?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, truth be told, I really did kind of fall into it because I remember when I had applied for the job that I had before the one I'm currently in, I really had been looking at like the job description and the bullet points on it. And that was what stood out to me as the like most interesting part of the job, not necessarily that it was in HR. But I think, I mean, kind of like what I mentioned before, just how I knew I liked working with people and that I liked to see kind of what motivated people and how people function together. And so I think I felt like I wanted to be in the people part of the, like one of the people parts of the business. And, you know, I think that now something I've realized like in my courses and while being on the job is just how important human capital is to a company, and how, you know, companies can't be successful without putting their people first, and investing in their people. So that's kind of what led me to that.
Thank you.
Great question. Okay, so Catherine posted a question I'll ask of the panel. What would you suggest to a junior senior who's interested in using their psych degree in the business sector, but doesn't have business econ background? How would you suggest getting your foot in the door to a starting role? Question, Catherine.
That's a great question, because another one of my passions is entrepreneurship. And so I actually created a company. It's a startup, but just last week we got chosen by Forbes as one of the top startups in the United States. And so, it's an easy transition, really. You have the skill set going through the psych program, again, the quantitative and the qualitative skills to really understand how to build a team and bring them together and get them to function at their peak, which is very important. And then to really understand, what the needs of the customer are, because that's all business is identifying a need and providing a solution that people are willing to pay for to that need. And I think that, you'll be able to do that with a psych degree and instruction, because you'll be able to really talk to people and understand what they want and need, and that's not an easy thing to do. A lot of companies build businesses that fail because they don't understand their customers' needs. And I think that your background will give you a head start on that.
Yeah, I think one thing that I also wanted to add is I think it's totally fine if like not having a business or econ background. I think one of the things that I thought while I was in college was that I needed to have the business or econ background, because so many of my classmates who wanted to go into business were econ majors. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter. It's the education. And I think the fact that you can be a psych major, jump into a random class like adolescent psych or physiological psych are ones that come to mind, and just be able to excel at them. It gives a good experience for being able to jump into anything and learn how to do it. And I think that there's also plenty of things too that are on campus that are good talking points, that are things you can do on campus that are good talking points in an interview. I think that like one of the things I did was phone-a-thon. And so being able to talk about in an interview, like I, picked up the phone, called, 50 different alumni, had conversations. I wasn't afraid to just talk to people and try to hit a goal of, donations hit in one night. It shows a lot of things. It shows that, like you said, you're willing to work, like I said, you're willing to work with people who you don't necessarily know, you are motivated, you're hardworking. So there's things like that on campus that you can definitely talk to. And I think just because you're a psych major doesn't mean you have to limit, just because you're not an econ major doesn't mean you have to limit yourself to a business role.
And don't you also think, because I don't think I mentioned this up front, but I'm also a Holy Cross alum and I was a psych major. And I was at Fidelity Investments actually for 11 years. I think Elizabeth knows that. But don't you also think, and I would love any of you to kind of jump in on this, but I think the liberal arts education as well, like in addition to the psych major, talk to me a little bit about, particularly thinking about going into that kind of that business sector. How do you kind of capitalize or really kind of tout that education that you bring? That I think I often find that students sometimes almost like apologize for that. Like, oh, I know I was a psych major, I was a history major, I'm a liberal arts, I wasn't a business major, but I actually think you have a whole different kind of skill set and experience that you bring that you can really kind of capitalize on. So how have you seen that come through as you've kind of, navigated your career? Any one of you?
I think the biggest thing is, one, the liberal arts education is really important, and being able to articulate what that helps you bring to the table is important. But in order to maximize that, I would say be courageous. Don't box yourself in. When you're a student, I can remember it like it was yesterday. You tell yourself all these stories about the limits you have because you're in one major or the other. And the fact of the matter is, if you work your tail off and do the best you can in the classroom and push yourself and get involved and get outside your comfort zone, that is what matters in the outside world. And most people, when you sit down across the table and do an interview, that's going to shine through that this person is really, energetic. They've learned a lot of different things with the liberal arts education, and they're going to be trainable. They're hungry for the next thing, and they're smart, and that's what matters at the end of the day. In any business, law, anything I've seen, that's what separates people. Just that fearlessness.
Yeah, I think also I remember getting some feedback my first year at work, and some of my teammates had said like you're a quick learner, and I felt like that I could attribute that to my Holy Cross education because like I mentioned before, another example is like just taking like a random art history class or a random class at Holy Cross. You're able to just kind of jump into and learn. And I think that there's so much that you learn on the job, and in an ever-changing world where business and technology change so much, like, by the month or by the year, people who have gone to business school undergrad, who were learning about, social media trends, things are going to look different in 4 years when they graduate. So I think, getting the Holy Cross education, it's so well-rounded and you can think outside the box. You're not just thinking about things in like a business mindset, maybe.
And I think that piece of it has held really true for me as well. As you're going through your 4 years at Holy Cross, there's so much unconscious learning that's happening. There's so many skills that you're practicing that you probably don't even realize that you're doing that. And what you were saying, Elizabeth, about sort of reapplying those skills to a different environment, I think is really true in medicine too. Like, nobody knew how COVID was going to pan out. We did not learn about COVID in medical school. I hadn't learned about COVID in residency, and here I am taking care of COVID patients every day. And so that's a skill that I learned through Holy Cross and through residency unconsciously on how to be a lifelong learner, how to readapt, how to apply knowledge to different scenarios. And I don't think most of us appreciate that we can do that until we're put in that situation. So give yourself some credit that you are learning some of these things, even if you don't realize it.
Great. And Nia, while I have you, a question for you from Sophie. So how did you know that you wanted to go to medical school and not PA or NP school? And if you're deciding between one or the other, what were some of the deciding factors for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that's a question that a lot of people in pre-med have. I think all three options are great options. What I would recommend is you think about sort of what you want your next step to look like. And I think that might help inform which route you want to take. So thinking about like the step after your medical education. For me, I had wanted the longer training that medical school gives. So I'd wanted to go to school for another 4 years and then have to do residency after. And I think the reason is because I just felt like I would feel more comfortable afterwards practicing medicine. And then in terms of thinking about what you want afterwards, I had always known that I wanted to do more independent practice. And so going to medical school affords that in terms of being able to just sort of be your own boss and make your medical decisions on your own. And then I'd also wanted to have more leadership roles down the road in medicine. And so I think those were two of the pieces that pushed me in the direction of medical school. And I think nowadays, a lot of PA and NP programs do have the option of doing residency afterwards. So I think that, the training piece of it is a choice you can make in all three pathways. So just keep that in mind as well, like how much training you want and then what you want your career after school to look like. And I think that may help sort of figure out which way to go.
Thank you. So I know we have about 10 minutes left. So again, students, if there's other questions, feel free to pop those in the chat. What I will ask, I guess what I'll do is I have a couple like that I can ask because we're seeing if there's any others that come up. So one question I would have for all three of the panelists is like, what kind of parting advice would you give to some of the psychology majors here today or some of the students thinking about psychology? Like what advice would you give them as a kind of a key takeaway?
I would say, again, I think I've said it, to really just take advantage of the opportunity and really be courageous in your thinking about what the opportunities you have are, and reach out to the professors, build build those relationships, and make the connections with your classmates too, right? Because everyone said this, but it really matters. Outside the academic piece, a big part of being successful in the world is being able to build and sustain relationships and having empathy for others. And you're learning all of that at Holy Cross, and that doesn't happen everywhere to every college or university. Holy Cross is unique in that way. And you might not appreciate it, but I would say really embrace it and dive into that, because it's really gonna help a long way. Like in the corporate world, there's nights when you're up all night because you have a big decision to make, and you want to be with people you like. If you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you have to make a crazy decision that's going to affect a lot of people's lives in the business. You want to be around people that have integrity, that you trust, and being able to sustain those relationships with what you're practicing now, and also the work ethic. Working hard. And I think that Holy Cross, it forces that upon you. And I don't think you realize it, because I didn't when I was there. It was just a lot of work, and I didn't realize how different other people's college experiences were. And so just really embrace that, because that's going to separate you. It really is.
Yeah, I didn't realize how different other people's college experience was either until I left Holy Cross. Even today, my husband and I talk about how different our colleges, were. He went to Tufts, and Tufts is a great school. But I think back on Holy Cross and remember how awesome it was. And I remember how much I loved being there. I remember crying on my graduation day because I didn't want to leave. And he remembers being in these big classrooms listening to a lecture, and that was about it. Whereas I'm remembering all of the relationships I had with my professors, who were amazing mentors to me, and my friends who I still talk with today. So, your careers are really important, and work hard, put yourself in situations where you might be uncomfortable because you're going to learn a lot there. But also just appreciate your time at Holy Cross, because it is a special time. And, 4 years is a finite amount of time. And once it's over, it's over. But enjoy it while you're there. And then obviously join the alumni pool, and then you'll get to still have that network of support.
I totally agree with what Tavares and Neha both said. I think that, I spent a lot of my senior year worried about what I was going to do next. Like I kind of mentioned, I wasn't exactly sure what I would do for a career. And I think that easier said than done, but in hindsight, I really do wish I had just more so enjoyed myself while I was on campus and put less pressure on myself to find a job right after graduation. You will get a job, you will figure out your career, but you're only at Holy Cross for 4 years. And I think that another thing is just don't limit yourself. Just because you're a psych major or you went to a liberal arts school does not mean that you can't do any type of job that's out there. And you learn so much on the job, and there's the job options are really much bigger than you might even think. Like I think when I was my senior year, I really didn't know that, like, I didn't even know the job that I have now existed when I was a senior. So you will learn so much with time, but yeah.
Fantastic. So any final questions for our panelists from any students on the call before we close out? All right. Well, I hope this was helpful. I know I found it super interesting and helpful, so I hope all the students did as well. I want to thank Neha, Tavares, and Elizabeth for taking the time to chat with us tonight and share their experience. I think they provided some great perspective and some really great advice that hopefully all of you kind of consider and take to heart as you move forward. And feel free, if you haven't already, leverage the Center for Career Development. We're here to help you kind of navigate a lot of this and kind of figure out what you're interested in and what you value and kind of where your passions kind of align with the world of work. So please do reach out and schedule time if you want to kind of chat through anything that maybe came up for you even tonight as we were talking through some of the things here. So thank you again, everyone, and have a fantastic evening.
Bye, everyone. Stay safe.